nine, eight, seven, six, five, four, three, two, one.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Mahesh Narayanan. I'm one of the venture partners at Newchip, and we have three great companies in life sciences from our Newchip cohort. And I'll go through each one of them. We have Frank Minella from PainQx, Sourabh Kharait from Magna, and Vipula Tailor from Sonix. So thank you for each of you for taking your time of your busy schedules to take part in the startup panel. So let's start with Sourabh. Please go ahead and give us a introduction about yourself, and then we'll go to Vipula and then Frank.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sourabh Kharait. I'm the founder and CEO of IGH Naturals. We're a startup based in California, and we make electrolyte solutions, which are more individualized for athletes as well as patients. A couple of years ago, we launched our formula called Magnac, which utilizes magnesium as one of the principal ions in our electrolyte mix, with the idea of reducing muscle cramps and soreness in athletes. And we're now focusing on developing niche electrolyte solutions for patients suffering from electrolyte wasting disorders. We just, we're almost wrapping up our seed rounds. And we work closely with the Newchip Accelerator program. So excited to share our story.
Vipula, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm founder and CEO of Sonix Medical Devices. What we are trying to do in Sonix is to combat bacterial infections without having to use antibiotics ever. That's the goal. At the moment, we are looking at combining a lot of physical energies to really be able to kill the bacteria, and you can do that very well. Only thing is most of them are actually harmful to human bodies as well. So we've been able to figure out a way to keep no effect on the human bodies, but just very selectively kill the bacteria over a period of very short time, like 20 minutes. And the applications are pretty large in terms of pre-surgery. Right now, there's nothing in the post-surgery, so we are able to, embark in that space as well. My background is I'm a medical immunology and microbiology by training, and I have worked in big pharmas and medical device companies like Johnson & Johnson, Kimberly-Clark, Pfizer, GSK, you name it, and have been able to launch products globally. So that's a big asset I found that I had from those companies getting trained to be able to really understand what the patient needs are and how do you get access to the drugs or the devices to the patients and how the reimbursement works. So I think this has been a fantastic experience with me at Newchip. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Frank, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, I'm Frank Minella. I'm founder and CEO of PainQx. PainQx is a digital diagnostic. We're a digital medtech platform poised to be the world's first FDA-cleared medical device to objectively and quantifiably measure pain. We do this by using the modality of EEG. We capture neural activity. We then send it to the cloud through our pipeline, process it through our proprietary algorithms, and then report it in real time to clinicians to give a classification of pain. We're all familiar with the issues of pain, especially through the opioid epidemic. And we've all been in the position of having been required and asked to rate our pain on a scale of 1 to 10. PainQx intends to put an empirical framework around that and take the subjective and turn it into the objective. So I've been at this for the better part of 5 years. We are in our Series A round of funding right now. We did a successful seed round back in 2018 and then did a lot of prospective clinical studies and trials and heavy lifting. And we're here now as part of the Newchip cohort, and we're very happy to be here.
Excellent. Thank you again for your introductions. I do understand that each of you are in different parts of the United States. It'd be great to understand how COVID-19 has affected each of you and how development processes are going. So let's start with you, Frank. Tell us where you are when you started the company and how the current COVID-19 pandemic has affected your business development processes.
Sure. So as you can see, I'm high above the beautiful city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, virtually at least. We're an East Coast-based company. I started this. I'm from the Northeast, and most of my team is scattered between Boston and Washington. We were virtual prior to COVID, so that kind of gave us a seamless transition. And we were virtual out of need, out of necessity, because it was a way, given the fact that we had to acquire data from patients and set up the clinical sites. But once those sites were done, there are certain challenges inherent in that. I wish we could have raised enough money to have a physical facility. But as a scrappy early stage startup, you have to make every dollar count. And certainly, a physical space was one of those areas that we could compromise on. COVID-19 has presented us with a myriad of challenges. Most importantly, it delayed our phase 2 development work. We are an NIH recipient of a grant for a device to objectively measure pain. And part of our milestones for the phase 2 portion of that grant was to collect 300 patients in a prospective study. And that was put on hold by COVID. We were just in the first throes of that. We had been IRB cleared, and when the quarantine hit, it halted all of that. So we literally lost about 5.5 to 6 months worth of time. My team voluntarily took a freeze, and we froze all burn rate that we could, except for some maintenance issues, with database and cloud sourcing, that sort of thing. But, we then applied for the PPP loan. We did have that, but that was just a very temporary reprieve. And then we weathered the storm, so to speak, and we were able to now re-engage on that phase 2 study portion of our development, where we are now actively recruiting from 3 clinical sites, ironically in New York City, which was once the epicenter. But it has certainly impacted the rate of patient acquisition. It has certainly influenced the whole scheme of fundraising, which we're talking about here is the focus of this. When the market crashed, a portion of people we had been engaged with, from high net worth individuals to family offices, just simply, panicked. And for the first 90 days or so, nobody knew what was up, down, left, or right. So it certainly presented a shock to the system. But it's something that, you have to muddle through. As early stage companies, we all know this wasn't easy to begin with, but COVID certainly made it harder.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's quite common throughout all the startups that we're working with. So thank you for sharing for that. And Vipula, how about yourself? Where are you located? When did you guys start? And how has COVID affected you?
I'm located in Atlanta. And this was just a relocation from Boston. I was actually based out of Boston, and my core team member, he's out of Philadelphia, and my other team member is out of Florida, and other one is in Boston. So we were virtual, but not that much virtual, because we were actually, assembling the parts of the equipment. We were building the, design and everything else. So we used to work in the lab. We still have a lab in Philadelphia, which is now co-leased to somebody else. So we kind of like managing the burn rate, just like Frank said. And I moved my residence from Boston to Atlanta for 2 reasons. I think Boston is more of a biotech company rather than medtech. And so even though I had great network, I think it was not the right individuals who would finance something like this and invest in companies like ours. So whereas in Atlanta, you actually have a good network of medtech companies. Obviously, the patient-facing and the provider-facing has affected to us as well. In terms of fundraising, we haven't slowed down. We have had a lot of interactions with European, wealthy individuals. We had one disaster that was, we were going to get a $5 million investment, but that person actually had COVID and he passed away. So obviously that was kind of like, a big shock to all of us. I just haven't gone back yet because it's still kind of like pretty, raw in terms of going back. So we're kind of like holding off on that. The team knows us very well, so we may go back next year. But right now we just, I think financially we are okay. I have been doing some side work on the PPE side, so trying to get some money that way to keep the company alive. And it's going well so far, touch wood, yeah.
we're in California, we're in Northern Cali, and with COVID, there was multiple things. One was there was a shell shock initially when we started the cohort in the sort of the investor outreach. It was probably one of the worst times to actually, reaching out to investors, through cold emails. It was almost impossible to hear from them. It was difficult, because nobody really knew the metrics of economy and then what's going to happen in the next few months. So getting investors and getting them interested was probably one of the most difficult times. And as the summer months started to set in, people had more time to stay at home. Products that are, in fitness world, electrolytes, hydration were picking up steam. So we didn't, after the initial shell shock period, we didn't see a drop in sales. In fact, we started seeing an increase in sales and revenue without much of advertising. So that was a good sign for us. So the business did take a back seat for the first at least 45 days until we figured out what we needed to do. So there was that lag period. But overall, I think at the end of June and July, where most of my investors came in through high net worth individuals, probably had some time to understand that this disease is going to be with us for some time, and that there's a lot of things that can go on in parallel, not the same way, but in a similar pattern. That's when most of our sort of investors started to start showing interest, and we started to have more conversations.
Oh, perfect. And all of you mentioned the investment side of things, which is certainly a big part of business development. So, Sourabh, I'll come back to you because I know that you've successfully been able to raise some funds during COVID, which is, again, a lot of companies are struggling. So I would love to kind of hear your perspective on how you went about it, how, what worked with those investors, especially in June and July, and, how, you went about it.
So I think the main concept, I would probably say that healthcare, health and wellness industry, I guess medtech and all, has actually seen a lot more interest. Probably we are more aware of public health emergencies and urgencies that face. So whether it was a stabilization of economy or just a general understanding of from the investor side, when we started to reach out, what really worked for us is having some sort of a warm introduction from a third party, as opposed to a completely cold email. And I think I can attest to that. Emailing someone on the East Coast with a completely novel concept, someone who's actually not in the field was probably going to be a very long shot. But having somebody within a network, and that's what we utilized. We actually had people who had raised money for different tech ventures in the Bay Area, had an investor outreach group, or sort of group of angel investors. We had warm emails through their channels that worked really well in our favor. We tapped individually into sort of the investor clubs who collectively invest together. They do their due diligence once, and then one investor gets in a lot of co-investors. So we thought that would be a good low-hanging fruit. So we did that. It overall was a good strategy because we focused a lot on high net individuals in medicine and pharmaceuticals, executives who have had roles in pharmaceuticals and med technology, who understood the path, the vision, as well as the product. And I think that was kind of the key. And I think based on where the phase you're in, I think the seed funds, the pre-seed round, it still is very much an angel round as opposed to a venture capital round. And a lot of our introductions from the VC world were really to be noticed, to have a relationship, hopefully within the next 2 years, and to show them, our translocation from point A to point B.
Oh, perfect. No, I think that's a great strategy to go after, especially, right now, I feel like a lot of investors, especially early stage investors, maybe aren't too keen on investing because, they're not sure where the market is. They're not sure how exactly can you meet in person. It's been a very, interesting time for investors because more often than not, they want to meet you in person. They want to see your team. They want to see your product in person. So Vipula, can you tell me, how that experience has been so far with many of the investors that you have talked to and spoken with pre-COVID, how it's been since COVID started,
Sure.
and what your experience has been in fundraising?
Sure. I think we started our conversations pre-COVID. So I attended the MedTech Summit in California in February, actually end of February. That's when kind of like all COVID started here, right? So I had an opportunity to meet with all the strategic partners that I wanted to meet. And because of my previous work experience in those companies, I think like, Sourabh was saying, it's always warm when you actually have some kind of common thread between you and potential investors. So I was able to leverage that. We have had, in fact, 2 due diligence going on right now for strategic, licensing deals. So we haven't actively looked out for Series A investors at this point, just because we don't want to dilute out our company. It's really early on, and we have a device that's actually ready for 510K approval in a cosmetic space, although it is still going to, proof of principle is still going to be reduction of bacterial infections. So we are actually going to do that as our strategy. So we have enough money to do that right now. And then that will become our, predicated device. And then we're going to go after the dialysis market. So we've been talking to DeVita, Dialysis Center, Frisco's, Edwards, and also from licensing perspective, we have been talking to people like Stryker. And that's because the technology platform, we have a lot of avenues to monetize. So that's kind of like what we're doing. We are actually vertically, we are monetizing each individual indication to be its own right of companies, let's say. So we have been very successful. We've been having conversations. I think I've had more conversations because everybody was available because they were less on plane. So I think that made a big difference. So we have been able to successfully advance our relationship. And I think come end of this year, early next year, when we have filed the FDA filing, that's when I want to start the A series so that our valuation goes up from where we are today.
Oh, perfect. And I do know that you have to leave early, so I'll ask the last question for you as well, and we'll come back to the other gentlemen.
Sure.
So in terms of successes or failures, what have been things that have happened in the past 6 months or so since COVID-19 started? When has the team come together? And you already mentioned one failure where the investor unfortunately passed away. But what have other things that have really impacted your company, both positively or negatively, if you would like to share that?
Yeah. So negatively, I'll share with you the technology that we're using for a common layman's term. It's like, oh, you're using light and ultrasound. What's great deal about this, right? And that's kind of like what the investors are always kind of like, probing you, saying, okay, well, it's already, what's novel about this? And I think until you have the NCNDA, it's really difficult to tell them the mechanism of action, because there is a mechanism of action with our device. It's actually a biochemically triggered mechanism of action. So we have an on and off switch with our device. So I think that was a little bit difficult prior to COVID, and post-COVID, it has become so relevant that people understand the importance of infection. Like 50% of the COVID patients had co-infection with the bacteria in the lungs, and we can actually help those patients. So I think there was like a bittersweet, initially I was like struggling, okay, how do I explain to these people that it's just not combining light and ultrasound? Somebody would have done it if it was that easy. We have had, so on my team, I have, a guy who, Mark, who's a chief technology officer. He's an ultrasound guru in the world. He sits on the ultrasound societies and, all that kind of stuff. The thing is, obviously, we could not hold him to be a full-time with us. So he's just accepted a position at Drexel. So I'm kind of like trying to, how do I bring him back? is another challenge for me, but he loves what we're doing, so he's going to be part of the company going forward. That's not an issue, but those are the kind of things I think you kind of like have to hammer it down, saying, okay, where do we go from here, from this stage? And it's not all about money, right? It's about how do you bring the technology and the talent moving forward as well. So that's kind of like where we kind of like had a little bit of a backset in terms of personnel, but he's back on again, and I told him, I said, you have to work day and night. I don't care what you do at Drexel. So, but the wonderful thing has happened in that sense as well is he's going to be leading the Drexel program. So we actually have a postdoc that will be working with us now from his lab to be able to accelerate some of the designing and testing that we wanted to do. So I think it's kind of like worked out well for us, but obviously it was a little bit concerning for me being a CEO of the company to say, if I lose my team, how am I going to progress, right? So so that was kind of like the aspect of it.
No, yeah. So thank you again for sharing that. And again, if you do have to leave,
Yeah. Thank you.
So, thank you again for joining, Vipula. It was really insightful with all your answers. So again,
thank you so much. Lovely meeting all of you guys. Take care. Bye.
Absolutely. Best of luck.
Thanks.
And Frank, we'll come to you.
Sure.
So, you kind of understand the two different questions that we had. So the first one being, what has worked and what has not worked when it comes to fundraising? Where have you met the investors? How are you planning to move forward, especially, with the fully virtual, meetings at this time? What has been successful from your perspective?
Well, I think that the answer to that question depends on which stage you're in. I mean, certainly what worked in our seed round, we were very fortunate. In the seed round, my technology was literally at the proof of concept stage, and I was able to raise 1.6 million with basically a PowerPoint presentation and me being in person to targeted angel groups. We're a life science company, so we targeted the angel community and went after specific life science-based angel groups that had members that were had the depth of knowledge and expertise in that arena. And it was literally a number. I mean, any of fundraising is a numbers game, in my opinion. I've been doing this long enough that you could have the best technology in the world. You could have the best team in the world. You could have the best unmet need in the world. But if you don't meet the right person with the right, checkbook at the right time, getting those funds is going to be difficult. So it is a difficult, hard challenge. And what worked in the seed round, I think, is different than in the Series A, based on how much you're raising. I mean, for us, we're trying to raise $5 million. And from what I've seen in the past year, that's kind of a difficult challenge. I see that the people who are raising a seed round, or even family and friends before that, and going up to $1 million have been successful in raising capital. And if you're raising a Series A or B round that is north of 10 million, you can intrigue and entice a whole host of opportunities within the funding community, more of the institutional VC. So we'll see. But I do know that the process is new, but it does present a different venue of potential investors than just cold calling on people or trying to go to virtual conferences now or trying to engage with high net worth individuals. But make no mistake about it, the hardest part and the most frustrating part of what I think this whole ecosystem being startups, especially in life science or biotech, is getting access to true capital. I'm convinced that there are many, many viable, successful therapeutics and diagnostics that have been left by the roadside because they weren't able to have access to capital. So it is what it is. We just need to persevere and push through that.
No, absolutely. And I think it's very interesting that pretty much all three companies, you guys have focused on some different aspect of fundraising. And I think now investment banks, they're realizing that they have to be part of smaller rounds because they're running out of companies to take IPO. So they have to bring more companies, from the seed round up. And so I'm definitely seeing more and more investment banks, especially the more established ones that have the bandwidth to go work with smaller companies, raise the first 5-10 million, and then help them go raise another 40-50 million if they want to go IPO. And so I think there's a lot of money in the NSF or NIH or any of the federal agencies that have ridiculous amounts of money, to be honest. If you're looking at BARDA and how they're they're funding half of these COVID vaccine trials, right? It's like 50 million, 60 million, they're just handing it out for companies who are being able to show what they can do and are able to push technologies forward. So I think there's still a lot of money left in the government, especially right now when the focus is pretty much around biotech and pharmaceutical companies and trying to help with COVID-19. But I think all the other companies within life sciences can actually take advantage of that as well, and kind of push things forward and say, hey, we are important. I know the other things are happening, but things we can contribute to things as well, and there are a lot of innovative ideas coming out in life sciences that are not related just to COVID-19. So, Sourabh, kind of extend that question to you as well. Is when it comes to successes, what have you found within your team that has been successful in the past 6 months? And have there been any failures from your perspective that could have gone your way had it not been for COVID-19?
Yeah, absolutely. I think failure is a part of startup, and I think if you don't have failure, then you're not learning or you're not doing it right. And this, the main part of this really is, I think founders, they have the expertise in their field, but that's just how the founder works. But there's a lot of aspects that you don't think in detail. In my particular case, I would say I had the expertise about formulation and probably some market research, but not really about maybe the really good financial projections, and then market strategy as to what would be the better way of introducing a product into the market. And I think looking back at those points, things I would do a little bit differently is to build a team earlier on as opposed to later. Get more strategic advice before as opposed to during or just at the time of fundraising, because that's what really defines how much you want to raise and how you want to raise it, and it makes it much more simplified. And over a period of time, when I look at my investors now, these people have known me for about 7 years, and that's the reason why they knew about my expertise, my integrity, my ability to execute. So in defense of a lot of venture capital funds, it is understandable that you are going to take time, but do you plan for that? And most founders don't. So what happens is that you end up in the vacuum where you need the funds. You have an idea. I mean, we were revenue positive in month 2 because it was a product that was selling, but we didn't. I mean, the whole part of the raise was, can we scale it now? And when we approached the traditional institutions, we were too early. When we were approaching the angels, they didn't have enough idea about the product. So then you get stuck into this, who do you really raise from? And I think the first seed, even though it's much, I would say in relative terms, it's much smaller fund, less than 1 million or maybe, $500,000, it's very hard to get because you just haven't climbed the first step, or you haven't even understood the first step of what it takes.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a very important point about fundraising, which is, especially in life sciences. I mean, you guys are lucky enough to actually be generating revenue because you have a product that actually can be sold right now. It's direct to consumer. Most life science companies, it takes years, like Frank or even Vipula, it takes years to actually go through the FDA process, and then it has to go be marketed, at which point it could be 10 years before the time you actually raise any type or get any type of revenue from your customer. And so majority of the investors, especially in life sciences, they're investing in the team, right? It's about, can the team execute? The idea seems great, but it's, I think it's within the industry, or at least, we see when we look at it, say, a great team can sell a mediocre product, right? But a mediocre team cannot sell a great product. It's just how it's come out, historically speaking. So the investors are really looking for a very strong team, and can the entrepreneur put together a team that they can build a product around, and and if the product doesn't go well, then can they pivot? And a good team can do that. Often mediocre teams cannot. And that's really what the investors are looking for. So I think it's a very important point for early stage life science companies to build a very strong team around yourself, so that they're looking at the team to be investing in, not necessarily a product to be investing in, because you don't really have a product yet. The product, most life science companies don't have a product.
Sometimes it is the jockey and not the horse.
I think you guys brought up some amazing points. I think we're about to get to the end of our session at this time. So I really appreciate your insights, and to be part of Newchip's cohort. I'm hoping that you guys are getting a lot out of what we're doing, what we're trying to teach to the companies, and also having a great demo day, which is what this is going to be part of. So I really appreciate your time. And hopefully both of you are, I believe, at least presenting at demo day. So good luck with that, and hope it's a successful demo day for you guys and every other company that's presenting in demo day for Newchip. So thank you again for your time, and best of luck, and I'll follow up with you guys soon.